And what always teaches me that learning has been effective is the depth of the conversation when we get a break. Like through that whole lunch break, I have found that everyone I've had the chance to meet is thinking about the important learning from this morning. So I trust that as we move towards our educator panel, that we will be just as inspired in terms of the work that we're doing. So I think it would be easier for me simply to introduce the panel very briefly, because I think it would be best for them to share who they are as they reflect on the different questions that they will be asked. So first, I would like to invite to the podium Božena Karvovska. Božena is the Associate Professor, Department of Central, Eastern, and Northern European Studies at the University of British Columbia. I would like to invite Jennifer Gurevich, forgive me if I didn't do that properly, who is the English Department Head at the York Catholic District School Board. Panelist Michelle Fair, who is a teacher with the Regina Catholic School Division. Panelist Aisha Sheikh, who is Learning Leader for High School Success and Social Studies with the Calgary Board of Education. And last but not least, the moderator of this wonderful panel, who is actually somebody I studied the principles course with over 20 years ago, Ian Jones, educator for over 43 years, retired principal with the Halton District School Board. Welcome Ian and the panel, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. That must have been my older brother that you were with in that course. Melissa has asked me to share just a few thoughts about my time as a principal at Milton District High School. I'm the guy that had the office with the pot-bellied stove that Max talked about last night. And I just want to share two thoughts that are, to me, significant about the work that we do. It's been mentioned several times, the importance of the power of the story. Yehuda Bauer, the famous Holocaust historian, says that the historian needs the storyteller. So I want to just talk about very quickly, two important things to take away from my experience teaching the Holocaust and leading a school that studied the Holocaust. The first is the importance of the key people in the building being on fire. Avi, the Compassion to Action program that you run is exactly where you need to be. If you catch the vision, if the people that are in decision-making positions in organizations catch the vision, they can make it work. I was the principal of the school, so I could make it work. My teachers may have come up with ideas on different things. They had the challenge of trying to persuade someone. I was the boss. I didn't have the challenge of trying to persuade somebody. I decided what we were going to do. Now, what goes along with that is what was mentioned earlier on, the passion of the people doing it. People would say to me, Ian, how can you get all your staff so engaged in this study? I would say, well, John Wesley, a famous 18th century evangelist, when people asked him how was he so effective, he said, well, I just go where there's a lot of people, I set myself on fire, and people come and watch me burn. And to be able to do that captures that vision. Second thing I want to talk about very briefly is the power of place. One of the things I tried to do with my school was to get as many kids as I could to places of significance. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, like saying to a group of teenage kids, the stairs we're standing on, the stair Anne Frank stood on. That stair. She stood on that stair. Max came and has been to my school numerous times and talked about when he was in Auschwitz, one of the jobs he had was to carry those big concrete stanchions to the places where they were making the wire. He and two other teenage prisoners carrying the stanchions. And when we were in Auschwitz, the kids would go and touch them and say to me, Mr. Jones, do you think Mr. Eisen carried this one? It's so powerful, the power of place. Someone has mentioned the effect that this has on kids as they continue. I'll tell you a quick story. At commencement, the last year I was the principal, a lovely young lady came up to me at the end of commencement, a very festive atmosphere and parents there and students just graduating. And this young gal, Victoria, had graduated from my school the year before, but she had come with us on one of my trips to Auschwitz. So she says to me in front of a group of people, "Mr. Jones, do you want to see my tattoo?" Maybe I do. Sort of depends. Where is it? Victoria reaches her hand out to me, and where so many unfortunate prisoners had numbers tattooed, Victoria had tattooed Chai. You know it best as L'chaim, life. So for all of her life, she has that tattoo on her arm. She's not Jewish. People would say, "Victoria, what's that about?" And that gives Victoria the chance to talk about something that happened to her. When we were in Auschwitz, one of the times we came back to the hotel, and I arranged with the hotel that we would have space to be able to do a little bit of debriefing. So I looked around the room after the meal, and I thought, we're the only people in the room now. All the other hotel guests have left, and it's just my group of 40 kids and my teachers. And so I gave the kids some debriefing exercises. I said, get in your teacher's group, and I want you to talk about what was your first impression when you got off the bus? What's the worst memory that's stuck in your mind that you just can't get out of your mind every time you think of Auschwitz? And what are we even doing here? There's lots of building going on in Milton, but none of it's a concentration camp, so why are we here? So the kids are talking, and there's emotion, and there's engagement, and I'm being the good principal, going around and encouraging. And I suddenly see an elderly gentleman get up from behind a pillar and start to walk toward me. And I thought, oh no, this is going to be bad. He's going to say it wasn't like that, and you're not telling the truth. And I mean, all the bad things went through my mind when I saw this man walking toward me. And he got about 10 feet from me and just put his arms out to me and gave me a giant bear hug. And he said, "My name's Bernard Lund. And when I was a teenager, I was arrested by the Gestapo in my high school for handing out anti-Nazi pamphlets. And I was taken to Auschwitz, and I never saw any of my family again. And I've come back here with my wife to show her where I was. I live in Oslo, Norway now." And he said, "What you're doing with these kids is so, so important. Because soon, people will say, this never happened. Your kids can give testimony to the fact that they were there, that they touched the wire, that they saw the gas chamber." We corresponded with Bernard and sent him pictures, and kids being kids all gathered around him, and it was a very moving experience and something that you could never have orchestrated to be able to create something like that. The last little anecdote I'll leave you with is a situation that happened in a grade 12 course that we wrote at Milton District High School. Those of you in the Ontario system will be aware of the fact that at the end of a course there's a summative event that has to take place, which is a summation of the students' knowledge that they've gained throughout the course of the year. And so I would go to the class regularly and stay and listen to the kids' summatives. I wouldn't be the principal that's going to get there, but he's too busy, Max. I would go and sit and stay there and listen to the kids' summatives. So the first summative we did, the first year we ran this course, a young lady named Sarah Wallace spoke. And Sarah, by that time, was a Jewish student in my school, the only one that was there when I was there. And she talked about the March of the Living. And she had some video and some interesting stories relating her account on the March of the Living. And partway through her story, she broke down and began to cry because her great-grandmother was murdered at Auschwitz. Very emotionally charged moment for a second as Sarah kind of got herself back together and finished. The second half of the presentation, period, was Amira Hassan. Amira, wearing her hijab, coming to talk as part of her summative about the reality of being Palestinian and about the situation that the world has created through the media to portray all Palestinians as if they're Hezbollah and Hamas, and not true, not at all. And she's explaining her situation. And she talks about her aunt, not great aunt, her aunt in Ramallah, where there has been activity, there's been bombing, there's been all events taking place, and she's unable to get in touch with her aunt. And her mom's trying to get in touch with her by phone, and they can't, and they haven't been able to get in touch with her for a couple of weeks. And Amira starts to cry. Okay, everybody off to math class now, right? I mean, after two powerful moments like that, I just couldn't let those things be. So later in the day, I got my secretary to find out what classes the kids were in. And I got them to come down one by one. And when Sarah came down, I said, Sarah, that was so powerful. That was so emotional today. I mean, your great-grandmother, are you okay? And the first thing she said was, I felt so bad for Amira. Oh, my goodness, she can't even, like her mom can't even get her sister on a phone. That's awful. You can guess this story, can't you? Because when I got Amira down, I said, Amira, are you okay after that? It was so powerful today. And first thing she said, I felt so bad for Sarah. They would put you in a gas chamber just because of what you believe. And I went from that class to our teacher that was teaching that, and I said, Dave, if we stop now, we've achieved something. Because the politics of all of that are so complex and so difficult. And who knows what's the right answer to that sort of stuff. But I'm firmly convinced that if it's ever going to change, it'll change because Sarah Wallace sees Amira Hassan as her friend in grade 12. And Amira sees Sarah as her friend. And they know one another as individual people. So, just some anecdotes from the front line, the stuff that happens in school. You're going to hear from these folks now, frontline folks, who are doing the kind of things that you've been hearing spoken about. And enough out of me. Isha, you're up.
So good afternoon. I bring you warm wishes from Calgary. That's minus 26 today, but that's okay. We have a Chinook coming in tomorrow, so we'll be plus 4. So I'm going to start with just a bit about the story of why I'm here. So when Ian was talking about place, how does a female with an Arabic name, a child of a Pakistani, and then a Prince Edward Island girl, how do I become somebody carrying a message of hope, tolerance, and justice? So I've been teaching with the Calgary Board of Education since many, many moons ago, since 1981. And what has happened is, over that time, you've been exposed to different curriculums and different programs, and I decided to become a high school teacher. And I remember way back in the 70s that my social studies teacher was of Jewish heritage, and we all were taught the Holocaust in grade 11. In Alberta, and this is one of the things that I found amazing, I had an opportunity to look at what happens in curriculum through an invitation by Alberta Education, so that in the 70s and 80s we worked off an old, archaic enterprise curriculum. And then we moved to what was called the Foundations of a Western Canada Protocol that combined British Columbia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. But by 2002, Alberta, under different political governance, decided to switch to just a curriculum that was for Alberta and the Northwest Territories. And in that, it was based on the idea of looking at critical issues that encompassed all grades. So every grade focused on a concept like globalization. To what extent do you embrace nationalism, and to what extent do you embrace liberalism, democratic liberalism, and all that comes with it. I was just coming back from taking my son to Denmark. He was going to school 2 years ago, and there was a phone call from Lori Hartwick and Brian Sander, and they said, can you meet us for coffee? And I'm sort of jet lagged, and I said, sure. And Brian opened up an opportunity of a world which allowed me to experience the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal and Max. In 2006, I had the pleasure and the privilege of joining the Compassion to Action tour to go to Poland, Germany, and Israel. And even though in previous years as a high school social studies teacher, I've taken my students to different places like the former Soviet Union, I've taken them to Paris and London, but we also did battlefield and Holocaust tours as well. So we took kids to Dachau, we took them to Sachsenhausen. But to be honest, it wasn't the same unless Max was there. I have such a different experience of sitting beside Max on the plane, walking beside Max in Auschwitz, that something inside me switched. Something inside me switched so much that my friends that are in the Middle East, my family in the Middle East, I was going to start putting and placing information on social media to make sure that knowledge was spread. Not just the knowledge that's presented from one perspective, but knowledge that is spread from other multiple perspectives to open dialogue and discourse. So that allowed me then to sort of become here. I took that experience, I put it into sort of a presentation, and I present it to staff, I present it to my students, because I'm a frontline teacher. I work in social studies, and social studies in Alberta is an integrated subject. We don't teach history, economics, geography is standalone. We teach critical thinking, issue-based, inquiry-based curriculum. And over time, even though we have a new program of studies that was phased in 2006, 7, and 8, and 9, we have a government now where all of the curriculum in Alberta is under revision. And I think their revision brings forth to what we need to have in world today. Currently, we have in our grade 11 program, we look at to what extent should national interest be pursued. That is the overarching question, the question for inquiry that we use, and the specific learning outcome that every teacher in grade 11 in all of the province, including the Northwest Territories, has to analyze ultranationalism as a cause of genocide like the Holocaust. It is mandatory teaching. The only other mandatory example that we have to use is the Holodomor, which is the Ukrainian famine and the Ukrainian Holocaust. The question says analyze. So when you analyze, you don't just provide facts to students. Students can grab those facts off of Google, off their phone. Analyze, ask them to do some critical thinking pieces, to do skills. We are filled in a time where you can gather information at millibytes. There's just tons of information. It's what you do with that information, which is the factual information, which is not factual. In grade 12, in our program of studies, again, it is to what extent should we embrace liberalism? To be honest, we could not use the word liberalism when I wrote on the curriculum because we had a conservative government in power. And that was, you couldn't use the word. Even though the course is about political ideologies, is to what extent do you embrace ideologies, which is a passive term. But what they were asking about is democratic liberalism. Can democratic liberalism be the political ideology that is viable and feasible and sustainable in this future? Is capitalism the economic system that the globe should embrace? Or does it have inherent challenges of us versus them, which piggybacks on the idea of ultranationalism, which is us versus them? In grade 12, students have to analyze the extent to which the practices of political and economic systems reflect principles of liberalism. So we introduce fascist ideology. And then we analyze why the practices of governments may not reflect the principles of liberalism. And we use the Holocaust yet again in grade 12 as the ultimate rejection of liberalism. If students on their diploma exams, and yes, Alberta has diploma exams, we're the last province that has mandatory exams that used to be 50% and now we're down to 30%, where students sit for up to 6 hours to write essays, not research papers, not the traditional essays, but essays based on sources. So the pictures that, sorry, now I'm going to have a brain fart. what Wendy was showing today. That's what we use in the classroom, primary sources. We don't ask them to memorize maps and dates. They have to know about the maps and dates. You can't make critical decisions and demonstrate critical thinking without foundational knowledge. But we use sources, and those diplomas are based on sources. You're given an image. We give images of concentration camps, and they have to answer the question, to what extent is the government doing something about this, and should the government respond to this? So we ask in a different way, and I was rather mortified, to be honest, that I thought all provinces asked students to do that. All provinces recognized that the Holocaust and the ideologies associated with those fascist regimes should be commonplace so that you don't repeat them again. In Alberta, in 1984, we had a social studies teacher named James Keekstra. Anyone heard of this gentleman? Holocaust Denier. And how did we know that there was a Holocaust Denier? Because you have a professional code of conduct to teach the curriculum a certain way. And Mr. Keekstra decided that he was going to teach his students that the Holocaust was a hoax, and he pulled in information from anywhere he could find. But how did he get exposed? On those diploma exams. As we were marking those exams, students are starting to present this totally opposite narrative than the government had said is issued in the curriculum. And even though those exams are anonymous, you can still track those identification numbers to the schools. And then you talk to the principal, and the principal says, it was a small place, Eckville, Alberta. We have one teacher doing that, James Keekstra. Not only did he lose his teaching license for not teaching the curriculum, but of course he was convicted under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. As a result of that, every student in Alberta is expected to know about the Holocaust. And at the Calgary Board of Education, we have a Holocaust symposium every spring where every grade 12 student is invited to Mount Royal University, where the Calgary Jewish Foundation pays for all the busing to bring all our kids there. There's always a moderator, either from the universities or the colleges. Then when they watch a movie, we used to watch the old World of War genocide, and now we've watched a new one. And then they meet with a survivor, so that every student in a division that has about 180,000 students in grade 12 get that experience. The last thing that I'm going to just finish with is our new curriculum focuses on two different things, competencies and skills. Foundational knowledge is different now. I am expected to instill in students skills that they can use in a 21st learning environment. Critical thinking, problem solving, managing information, creativity and innovation. Communication, not distinct dialogues, but how do you communicate in a respectful way? Collaboration, personal growth and well-being, cultural and global citizenship. And the last thing that I'm going to share with you are the foundational values of our new program of studies, which goes from K to 12, all subjects. The Alberta government believes that students are lifelong learners, inspired to pursue their aspirations and interests, to achieve fulfillment and success, and to contribute to rural communities and the world. And these are the desirable characteristics we hope to instill. Democracy and citizenship, treating each other ethically with fairness and equity by demonstrating social justice when taking action. Next one, belonging and identity. By exploring identity and developing a sense of self-belonging by confidently interacting and engaging with others. It is those students that are disenfranchised, disengaged from learning environments. Those are the students that we have to worry about. And integrity and respect, by demonstrating concern for self and others, by building and nurturing healthy relationships, by demonstrating empathy and compassion, by affirming truth, and by acting honorably and ethically. Thank you.
Ish has just answered all of my questions. So, Jen, the few questions I have left, you will probably answer.
Good afternoon. As introduced, my name is Jen Gurevich. I'm Department Head of English at St. Maximilian Kolbe Catholic High School in Aurora, Ontario. I'm here today to talk about the Holocaust in History and Living Memory program. Designed by Michael Nasello and Dominic Scully at the York Catholic District School Board, the program has its roots back in 2009, continued with field studies in 2012, 2014, 2015, and most recently in 2017, with students and staff from the York Catholic District School Board, the Peterborough, Victoria, Northumberland, and Clarington Catholic District School Board, and teachers from the Regina Catholic School District. The photos I'm going to share with you today are from this past summer's learning experience. The first page here is the title of our the first page of our blog from the summer's program. You can read more about our program and about our culminating activities. Students create photo essays in the best practices document that was launched yesterday. So you have access to the links to the blogs from both 2015 and 2017, as well as to some of our student photo essays as well. A key part of our program from the beginning has been Max Eisen. And here is Max with our group of students from the summer's program. And as Max mentioned, the key, and several other people have mentioned today, the key to building a program like this is to have people who are passionate about what they're doing, whether that's superintendents, directors, principals, teachers, and of course students and their parents. We're talking about a group of young people whose parents have found value in this program and who want their children to participate. Max has, as I mentioned, been part of our program since the very beginning, and in the summer of 2015, Max came with us, met us in Poland, and came with us to Auschwitz and to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And to say that, it's an understatement to say that it was transformative for all of us, but it certainly was. Through the program, our students earn 2 credits. They earn their English credit, and we're working with students from grades 10, 11, and 12. They also earn an interdisciplinary studies credit, which focuses on history, religion, and politics and law. I have been responsible for teaching the English credit. So you can imagine that with a group of approximately 30 students, 25 to 30 students across 3 grades, there are a number of different texts that are used. Our program begins with meetings, etc., in February, and then we do meet with the students in the spring before we have 2 weeks of classroom instruction and embark on, or 1 week of classroom instruction, and embark on a 2-week field study in Germany and Poland. This is a picture taken at the Topography of Terror, and a key part of our program is inviting our students to experience different types of sites. And so this is some of the learning that takes place while we're in Berlin. While in Berlin, we take a trip to Ravensbrück, a concentration camp, a former concentration camp for women. As I mentioned, our students are required to build photo essays as their culminating task, and often we talk to the students before we leave about the importance of respect, and there will be places where photographs are not allowed. And our students are very, very conscious of that. And I'll never forget in 2014, when we first got to Ravensbrück, Angie was our educator that day, and one of the students said, "Excuse me, is there going to be anything we see that we can't take pictures of?" And Angie said, "You must document everything. You must document and you must tell the story." And that really stuck with me as a teacher, and that's language that we've chosen to use in our program, that you're not taking pictures, you're documenting. And it's important to be respectful and to ask those questions, but that this is your responsibility as someone who is here to document and to take pictures. This is a picture of this summer's program with Matthias, who was our educator that day. I'd like to share with you a student response when I asked if it would be all right to use their photo essay on the website. And the student responded with the following: "I can't aptly describe the necessity I feel in sharing what we learned with anyone and everyone in the world. To help in sharing this message is something I will always be willing to help with." A key part of our program involves journaling and community circles, dialogue, debriefing what we've seen, debriefing what we're going to see. And certainly both the journaling and the community circles help the students to process what it is that they're seeing. This is an image of some quiet, reflective time when we were at Majdanek this past summer. One of our students wrote, this is since the field study, personally, taking part in the summer field study in Germany and Poland was really the starting point of my awareness of social issues around the world. Since then, I've started to really explore issues that Canada and the international community face in regards to racial inequality and discrimination. And really, what more can we ask? That for students to learn from this, to be witnesses, to bear witness, and also to carry forward their learning in other ways. When we return to Toronto, the students have the opportunity to present their learning at a symposium. They invite their family, they invite their friends to come and hear them present their photo essays, and they also have an art display. The task was designed by my colleague Michelle Miranda, and this summer was implemented by my colleague Linda Lossick. These are samples of some of the student artwork. We had one student who wrote an original composition and performed it, a number of different kind of multimedia pieces, and some paintings as well. And this is certainly one of the key lessons that I've learned, is that we need to invite students to respond academically, personally, and also creatively. And we've seen that with a Holocaust Education week piece that we developed that was multimedia, involved dance, involved drama, etc. So really a powerful learning experience for everyone. And I'm grateful to be here today to share this with you. Thank you.
Doesn't this make you want to be back in high school? Michelle.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Fair. I'm probably the newest kid on this block, this panel. I teach for Regina Catholic Schools, and Aisha was talking about being surprised about whether or not Holocaust education is compulsory, if it's mandatory straight across our country. In Saskatchewan, it's not. Our grade 11 curriculum, which is the history of the 20th century, would be the social credit that would touch upon Holocaust, depending on how much time you can squeeze it in. So it's something that we're working on at this point. In fact, I have been working for the past year and a half on the locally developed curriculum, the Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and so I just wanted to give you a little bit of a glimpse into that. It's just in its last stages right now, so it's got the full support of the Ministry of Education in Saskatchewan, as well as the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission and the Holocaust Education Foundation. So through the process of this, it started about a year and a half ago. In saying that it's not compulsory doesn't mean that we're not doing anything in Saskatchewan. Absolutely not the case. I attended a Holocaust Education Sharing Day in Moose Jaw in October, where there was a survivor that spoke with us, and that kind of got the ball rolling, laid the foundation for this curriculum building that we're doing at the moment. One of the activities that I did with my students, and just a little bit of my background, I teach social studies, but I'm mainly a Christian ethics teacher for grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 in French immersion. We had the opportunity last spring, a survivor was going to be coming to visit in April, and so in order to prepare my students, which is so necessary to do, I put together a museum experience for them so that they would have some information before we went to see the survivor that was going to be speaking to us. The topics that were put together, and thank Teachers Pay Teachers for this resource because it was very easy to put together. It only had 4 topics. It had the ghettos, concentration camps, resistance, and could genocide happen again? So at each of these 4 stations, students that we took through, me and a few other teachers that I invited to have their students come, students were invited to journal, to reflect on these primary documents, photos, maps, information, diary entries, and create their own journal response to this. It also had a lead up with the 1930s and Hitler's rise to power to give them some background going into this. So we did this on Monday, and students were very engaged. Their inquiry that came out of this was phenomenal. The questions that they were asking, you can see from the pictures, there was not anybody that wasn't completely enthralled by this. I'm sure that this was in April, and our survivor that was going to be speaking to us was Mr. Adler, who passed away the day before my students were supposed to hear him. So that night, I got an email that he had fallen ill, and so the next day when they were supposed to hear him, we went back, and in speaking about what do we do when people aren't around to speak to us anymore, quickly substituted in a website that had people's testimony that had been recorded with a filter system on it, so that depending on students' interests, if they wanted to hear stories of resistance or child survivors, or if they wanted to hear from a certain region because they might have a personal connection, they had that option, and then that was built into their reflection on this. So that was one activity that we did, and I'll come back to this in a moment. In Saskatchewan, the curriculum that we're building has some other connections in its title, which is Holocaust and Genocide Studies. We also have the connection, the Saskatchewan Western connection with Holodomor that Aisha was talking about. And so one of the resources that we have is the Holodomor tour bus that comes, which is along the same experience as the Tour for Humanity that you have here. So we can see that students have the opportunity to work with primary documents, diaries, witness statements, and they can interact with each other in answering certain questions and then presenting that. One thing that my students remarked to me about their experience, besides the heaviness of the topic, was that they didn't know what to do with it after we had finished. And again, just going back to the previous slide, that museum experience that I had put together didn't come with any kind of a follow-up. What I did when we came back from that museum experience on the previous slide was that we looked at the poem, The Last Butterfly, and the trailer for the documentary, Not the Last Butterfly, and talked about what do we do with this information, because it was very heavy for them and didn't want to just leave it like that. Our process in building this curriculum has been built out of the experience of accompanying York Catholic and PVNC on the trip to Germany and Poland this past summer. Myself and 3 other educators from my system were invited along as teachers/learners to see this. And so while building this curriculum, coming back from it, the whole piece of witness and what do we do with this experience and our call to action became a focal point where we kind of flipped the curriculum a little bit. And so if I were to go back and do that museum piece with them again, I had left could genocide happen again as kind of the last piece of it, but I would flip that now and put that first, which talks about the stages of genocide and leading up to that, and I would have put resistance last, and then our call to action and our responsibility as witnesses. This is the memorial for the burned books in Berlin, and I wanted to end with this piece because it does touch on what do we do from this, because you can see the empty bookshelves that are underneath the ground, underneath of what's all happening, but it's the reflection coming back, being able to look back at yourself and your own identity that students are called to take this information and then be able to apply it to their own lives and go forward from that. So that's been built into our curriculum, and we're going to be offering it next year, 2019, so that's pretty exciting for all of us, and so hopefully you'll hear more about it then. Thanks.
Where's Wendy? Wendy, I know Božena was particularly gratified to hear you talk about how important it is for university academics to engage this program, because we've heard of high school up till now. Božena is going to talk to us about what life is like at the University of British Columbia.
Hello, and first, thank you for being here and thank you for inviting me. I will be talking about a program that's very different than the high school programs, and it's difficult for me to say how really unique it is, but think about the university courses about the Holocaust and how many courses outside of the history courses are offered. My research background is actually in cultural anthropology and re-examination of memoirs. I mostly deal with memory-based literary texts. And I try to read them from new perspectives. So I was faced with questions that somehow translate also into the education. And what are the challenges of the text? What is the interaction between history, memory, and readership? There is historical research that not always aligns with the memory. People remember things differently. Then also some of the memoirs are fed by other memoirs. And the question of readership. You know very well that before the Eichmann trial, nobody wanted to listen to the memoirs of Jewish survivors. So it's very much what people want to listen to and what they translate it into. When we deal with the text, there are voices of victims and there are voices of perpetrators. And when I teach a class, one of the things that is always shocking to me, but also shocking to my assistants, is how students react to memoirs of Rudolf Hess, the commandant of Auschwitz. Because the personal touch that the survivors have when they meet with people, when you deal just with the text, is gone. And you don't really, or the young readers not always know who is the person behind the text. What does it all mean is that the question is what the disappearance of the survivors means, not for the education, but for us as people, for educators and for the researchers. Because the education doesn't happen by itself. It happens because we are here, and we will be here for a while. So I will not talk much about the seminar. It is based on the idea of the power of place, because I take students for a research seminar, and they spend 2 weeks in Auschwitz Museum and Memorial working with researchers there. And when we talk about the passion of people, you should see the passion of people, or passion of researchers in the museum, in Jewish Historical Institute, and Polish researchers working in various institutions whose passion is unparalleled. So we spent 2 weeks in Auschwitz. We spent around 10 days in Warsaw, working with Jewish Historical Institute. If if you take a look at the publication about the best practices that was yesterday on the tables and is available online, I'm talking about teaching through space there, so I will not comment on this, and I'll also not talk more about the program. You'll know at the end why. But what I realize when I'm working with students is that I work through creating needs, because the main difference when we go from a person to a narration is that a person walks into the room and gets the audience interested. The text doesn't do this. So our role as researchers and educators is to create the need to listen. So first is the need to learn. And this is what I do in the course. The title of the course is Representations of the Holocaust. I'm not teaching history of the Holocaust, but how the Holocaust is represented. Obviously, it needs to be historically responsible. So I'm teaching history as well, but through a narration. So for this, after taking the course, some students get into the international seminar I just talked to you about. And this creates the need to research. Research always results in a need to disseminate. And at university level, I cannot actually create an environment for the Holocaust researchers, because there is not such a program at my university. Those are elective courses. So I get students from across the university. And I engage them in thinking what you can do in your discipline that is somehow connected with what you learned in Poland from various researchers in all those places, and from different documents, different stories. Then once we are back in Vancouver, students present the research at conference. For the last 3 years, we were lucky enough to be able to invite one of the researchers that we work with in Poland. And those were Professor Jacek Leociak, an expert on the Warsaw Ghetto, Professor Paweł Śpiewak, director of Jewish Historical Institute, and this year Dr. Piotr Sitkiewicz, the head of the research department or research center at Auschwitz. So those are real experts in the discipline. This creates a need to share. Students want to share what they learned. And they share it among their families, their friends, but also I was lucky enough to get a grant that allowed me to create online courses in the Holocaust education. By now, I have 2 of them. Both are under the same title, Representations of the Holocaust. One is centered around the issues of the ghetto, the second around the issues of the camp. So students teach me how to teach them. They record lectures and in their area for the course. They create educational material. Also, the experts I work with created the material and lectures. I got also possibilities to employ some of the graduates of the program as undergraduate teaching assistants. So they get into conversation with students who are taking the class right now. It goes in all directions. Some of the students end up as high school or elementary teachers. Some go into completely different direction. One of the graduates who actually contributed to the book I'm going to talk about is in Toronto working for one of the financial firms here. So you see more or less everything there. And in something absolutely unprecedented happened. The Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum decided to put together a collection of essays by my students. It's here is how the book looks like. Here you have the book plus the content. It is, I think, something absolutely wonderful. Canadian students are the only one in the world who were able to put something like this, and now 2 million visitors each year in Auschwitz can go to bookstores there and get the book written by young Canadians. The footnotes for each essay are prepared by the experts in the area. So it's a multi-level book. It's I started to use the book because it just came over the summer as a textbook for the class. And what I realized that I can lecture students about something, but then they tell me at the end of the course, I couldn't get it, but I got it when I read the essay by such and such a student. They somehow know how to talk to each other. And I probably should stop here. I'll be still here, so if you have any questions, talk to me.
So isn't this great? Isn't it great to hear what people are doing? I remember, yeah, that's right. Good job, Susan. I remember when I first started engaging my staff at Milton District to work on the Shoah, I thought we were the only people in the world that did this. Maybe 18 years ago, we were the only people in the world that did it, I don't know. But had there been a conference like this that I could have come to and brought my staff to be encouraged by hearing what other people are doing, it's such a powerful thing. It's great. I love it that we get a chance to tell our stories. Well, I have no questions now, so we're absolutely done. We can move on. No, that's not true. I have lots of questions. But we had broken down the panel into 3 general areas: best practices, student engagement, and then the future of Holocaust education. So we've heard an excellent précis of best practices, but Isha, I'm going to start you with this. Can you talk to us about what some of the challenges are that you had to overcome to be able to do what you do?
Our challenges deal with the bureaucracy at our board. To be honest, sorry. In order to take students anywhere outside of the school requires almost a year's worth of work, meeting with risk management, and you must be able to identify every hazard along the way for 24 hours a day, and then you must sit a panel. And that was because many moons ago we had students go to California on a field trip, and a rogue wave swept 2 kids over, and 2 parents went in to try and rescue them, and we lost all 4, and the board was sued heavily. So as a result, it's almost impossible to partake in these kind of activities because of the bureaucracy. It's easier for us to bring survivors into the school, which on the alternating semesters where students go to the Holocaust Symposium in the second semester, we try and bring Holocaust survivors in on the first semester. So that's our greatest challenge.
Chip in, folks. Greatest challenges? How about greatest challenges, Jen?
I think for our program, one of the greatest challenges is time. The fact that our students are doing 2 credits, and for some of them 2 grade 12 university credits in a relatively short period of time about a very difficult topic. And so certainly the challenges that that presents are, for us as teachers and teacher leaders, how to balance the emotional impact with the required academic learning. And certainly we do new things every time that we run this program. So I think really that's one of the biggest challenges that we face.
Our challenge in Saskatchewan, I wouldn't look at the bureaucracy of getting our program going. I mentioned how our program is growing out of York Catholic, and that's thanks to Tom Sculia, who's our new director, who has brought this to us as a priority and a passion for him. I think that what it's going to be in the upcoming year is going to be financially to be able to plan a trip to Europe for students out of Regina, because Regina doesn't really fly anywhere direct. And besides that, it will be encouraging students to take that. Because it's a locally developed credit, it will not count as a social studies credit for them at the grade 11. So it just counts in as any other elective that they could take at that level. So they have so much choice that a student who would take the Holocaust and Genocide Studies course, we're competing with photography and any other elective at that level. So to be able to have enough students to be able to run the program is going to be a challenge for us.
And I wrote a bit about the challenges of teaching Holocaust classes at university in the publication. And I can add to what Ian said, that it's very important to have people in power position who get it. And obviously at the university, it's also where to teach those classes. So you have several levels of people in power who would need to get it or to go around them somehow. Finances. Having said this, I would say that those are not finances only. I'm the lucky one. I got behind the program people who were able to, or we refer to them as donors, but I would say that it's not just being a donors. It's to make me feel or that it's impossible to quit, doesn't matter what.
One of the things that was an issue that we had to deal with at Milton was the fact that creating a Holocaust course at the grade 12 level, if it didn't get you anywhere, kids were reluctant to take it. The rationale, this will make you a better person, doesn't work when you're trying to get into U of T. I'll be a better person once I get into university. Right now I need 6 credits to get me into university. So once we wrote curriculum, I had the guidance department contact the 6 most common post-secondary institutions that Milton District students attended, and we sent the registrar's office our curriculum and petitioned them to say, would you accept this as an entrance course? And they all did. So that meant that our guidance people could say to grade 12 students, this will make you a better person. And it will also count as one of your 6 subjects to get into university. So, I just had the idea. I didn't do the work. Don't clap for me. Let's just do a personal for a second. We're coming close to our time, and I want to give you a chance to ask a question. But I just personally want to ask these exceptional educators, Jen, what got you doing this?
So I read Night on my own in high school, but had no education in the Holocaust in the classroom. It was when I was studying in the Faculty of Education at York University. I had an incredible professor named Myra Novogrodsky, and Myra and I sat down for a debrief after one of my lessons, and Myra said, you know, it really is too bad that you're graduating this year because there's this amazing program starting this summer. And I said, no, I'm not graduating this year. I was in the Con Ed program. And she said, you're not? I said, no. And she said, okay, let's go. We're going to get the forms right now. And so what Myra introduced me to was the Learning from the Past, Teaching for the Future project, designed by Professors Mark Weber and Michael Brown at York University. And so in the summer of 2001, I had the opportunity to go with 10 teacher candidates from York University on a field study where we worked with 5 teacher candidates from various German universities and 5 teacher candidates from various Polish universities on kind of building relationships, looking at how the Holocaust is taught in all 3 countries and what we can do with this, working together moving forward. And I was also part of a reunion program in 2011 where we traveled to Poland and Israel. And so certainly the investment that people made in me through that program at that time is what has inspired me to continue this work. And I've had the blessing to be able to do it through this incredible program at York Catholic.
Great.
Mine is far more personal, coming from a very multicultural family with many different perspectives on world issues and being encouraged from a very young age to travel the world. I truly believe that travel is your finest educator. First-person experience can't be substituted by books and storytelling by me, even though I do try and share all my stories. In grade 11, I had a social studies teacher who was Jewish, and he spent a lot of time and passion presenting the subject. And even though at that point in time, because I know this is going to be filmed and I'm going to share it with him, he had said to me, you'll never amount to anything because you're not rational. My first job, guess who was the teacher I worked with? And so it was through his eyes, the travel and the thinking things through and trying to be rational and be critical and not just assume one narrative. So it's my parents and that one teacher.
Great. Good. Michelle?
Well, in the early 80s, when I was at a very impressionable age looking for heroes, Maximilian Kolbe was declared a saint. And that was really the first story of the Holocaust that touched me in such a way that, that someone would give up their life for someone else was really a springboard for a passion to find out more. So in that whole examination of story and identity and figuring out who you are and looking for heroes and wanting to know what you want to do and how you want to change the world, that was a springboard for me. That's what got me into it. And then this past summer, going to Ontario, because we're going to join this group of teachers that is going to Germany and Poland. We pull up in front of St. Maximilian Kolbe School, and I was just, okay, I've come full circle. I feel like I'm probably doing something right here.
For me, it's still an open question. I still don't know why I do it. Because going back, Jan, to what you said, it's also at university level when students are taking courses, we need to tell them what they are going to learn and how we are going to evaluate them. And then I'm evaluated on this as well. And when I tell students, you will be a better person, I have to evaluate it in rubrics. So it's maybe I do it because it's a challenge to do it. I grew up in Poland on the outskirts of the rubbles of ghetto, among people who wouldn't talk much about what happened. Then I also realized that people don't know how to talk about things. And even when they write the memoirs, there are areas they don't really know how to talk about. And I thought it wasn't right, because whatever happened, it was never, we have to build a non-judgmental language to talk about what was done to people. And this is what brought me to the research. And when I was doing the research, I also realized that the university or academic structure is built around the documents, and that we somehow very easily will lose the voice of the victims, because victims didn't produce the documents at that time in a comparable manner as the perpetrators. And this is what brought me to the education that is through the seeing what happened through the victims' eyes.
Thank you, Božena. Well, yes. I'll tell you in one quick sentence how I came to this. It's a very personal reason that I came to it. My only claim to fame is that I've been married to the same beautiful woman for 50 years, and I have 6 kids. Wow. 2 sets of twins. That's why I twitch like this. But we have birth twins and we have adoptive twins. Our adoptive twins are Jamaican Canadian, and our sixth son, our third adopted son, is gay. And we soon realized we're going to have to learn diversity in our family. How do people deal with life with someone that's not like you? And we quickly got the message that you can teach to kindergarten kids and university people alike. When difference leads to hate, it's wrong. And that was the message that we tried to carry through everything we did at school. I know that our panel have done such a great job that you don't have questions, plus which we have no time, even if you did. So let's thank our panel for what they did.
Just 2 more minutes before our next speaker. My name is Liora Shemish, and I am a part of this fine organization and have the distinct pleasure and honor of thanking this amazing panel. I was so fortunate as a young child and teenager and woman, as I was blessed with amazing teachers and professors and educators, and they all helped to shape me and guide me and supported me in becoming the person that I am today. But to know that frontline educators like you all are attending conferences and attending on Marches of the Living and learning about the Holocaust and researching and asking difficult questions deeply and emotionally makes me feel proud as a mother and as a Canadian. So thank you to all of you for being our educational warriors. Thank you very much on behalf of our organization.